My name is Solon Devo. I'm 34 years old, a policy strategist, a single mom, and as of last Christmas Eve, the black sheep of one of the most esteemed families in Westfield, New Jersey. I'm also the woman who stood still while her brother slapped her 7-year-old daughter across the face at a family dinner and said nothing. Not because I agreed, but because in that moment, my entire body froze the way it used to when I was 16, and my father shouted that emotions were a weakness. It took me 24 hours to decide I'd had enough. And now, I'm here to tell you how I dismantled the house of Devo Brick by Filthy Brick. We were at Aunt Cecile's former estate that night, now owned by my parents, Alan and Martha Devo. The place looked like a museum: crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, dead-eyed portraits of ancestors who'd probably rolled in their graves the moment a woman like me was born into their bloodline. It was one of those curated family events where everyone wears beige or navy drinks in moderation and fake laughs on cue. We were celebrating my father's retirement from his service to the community, a phrase so sterile it made me gag, knowing the man built his empire by laundering community development grants into vanity projects for his buddies. I arrived with Lily, my daughter, around 6:45 p.m. I'd dressed her in a powder blue velvet dress she picked herself. It was the first time we'd been invited to a Devo gathering in nearly 3 years, and I wanted to believe things might be different. Maybe my brother Derek would act like he remembered I existed. Maybe my sister Miss would ask about my job at the nonprofit, instead of pointing out that my shoes weren't Louboutins. Maybe my mother would look me in the eyes instead of scanning for wrinkles. Lily was excited, clinging to her little sketchbook, ready to show Grandpa a drawing she'd made of our apartment balcony garden. She thought it would make him proud. Things were already going sideways when we walked in. The music was low and stuffy. The wine had been flowing too early, and I spotted Logan, my cousin and family's walking PR disaster, bragging to a group of donors about his blockchain philanthropy. Classic Devo hypocrisy, speak of service, live for spectacle. Lily tugged my sleeve and asked if she could find Amber, Mrs. Daughter, to show her the sketch. I nodded, hoping a child's sincerity might cut through the frost. I found myself alone near the drink table when Derek's voice boomed across the room. "Don't touch that, you little brat!" I turned just in time to see it, his hand flashing out, connecting with Lily's cheek, her sketchbook dropping to the ground like a leaf. The room fell quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then my mother laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, Derek," she said, waving her hand. "She's a dramatic one, just like her mother." Lily didn't cry. She looked at me, her face burning red, one hand on her cheek. And I stood there like stone, watching the ice sculpture in the center of the room melt a little more. I think it broke something inside her, something that should have been protected at all costs. And it snapped something in me too. But I couldn't act. Not yet. We left 20 minutes later, under the excuse of Lily not feeling well. In the car, she stared out the window while I drove in silence. She didn't ask why I didn't say anything. She didn't have to. That night, when she was asleep, I opened the locked drawer in my desk. Inside, an old envelope addressed to me in my Aunt Cecile's handwriting, postmarked 2 weeks before her stroke. She'd always warned me to be careful with my family, but we hadn't spoken for years before she died. I'd never opened the envelope, until then. Inside, there was a note and a USB drive. The note read, "For when you realize you were never crazy, misdirection is their favorite currency. Use this wisely. See." I clicked open the USB on my old work laptop. It contained 3 things: a scanned ledger of Devo Trust disbursements, a photo of a handwritten will dated 3 weeks after the official one filed at Cecile's death, and a short video. Cecile, tired, gaunt eyes blazing, looked into the camera and said, "If you're seeing this, then I'm dead. And I need you to understand, I didn't leave you nothing. They took it. They erased you. And they think you won't fight. Prove them wrong." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watched the snow fall, and mapped out every Devo entity. I could remember the Charities Shell Corporation's offshore holdings tied to Allen's consulting group. I wasn't just angry. I was electrified and terrified. If what Cecile left me was real, my family had committed not just moral betrayal, but financial crimes, and they'd pinned some of it on me. I remembered the time I signed a power of attorney form in my 20s, when Dad said it was just for taxes, so he could transfer funds on my behalf to pay for grad school. I never saw a cent. But my name appeared on 3 nonprofit filings tied to real estate flips in Detroit. The IRS had once sent me a confusing letter about excess benefit transactions. I'd assumed it was spam. I called Miranda the next morning. She's a financial analyst who used to work at one of the Devo foundations before she quit over ethical concerns. We'd kept in touch, loosely bonding years ago over our shared love of urban gardening and bourbon. She picked up after the second ring. "If you're calling me on a holiday, it's either bourbon or blood. Which is it?" I told her I needed to meet, in person, that it was about the Devos, and that I had documents. She arrived 2 hours later with a laptop, 3 USB scanners, and that no-nonsense look she gets when she's about to eviscerate a spreadsheet. After reviewing everything, she looked up, her face pale. "Solon, this ledger cross-references with a Cayman account that lists you as the primary beneficiary. And this money, it's gone, spent, like, a lot. This wasn't misfiling, this was identity laundering." That word hit me like a punch. I'd always suspected they used me as a scapegoat when it was convenient back in high school when a laptop went missing and Derek blamed me. I got expelled, while he went on to Yale. But this wasn't teenage cruelty. This was criminal. And I had the smoking gun. "You know," Miranda said, pouring us both a drink, "they're not going to let you walk away quietly with this. If you make a move, they'll come for you legally, socially, maybe worse. You ready for that?" I wasn't. Not fully. But I looked toward the hallway where Lily's drawing still lay folded on the bench. A small garden sketched in pencil. My daughter's dream. My legacy. My line in the sand. "Yeah," I said, "I'm ready." What I didn't know yet was that Cecile's message was just the start. That the will on file was forged. That my mother had signed off on every false transaction, even the ones involving child welfare grants. That one of my oldest friends would turn on me. And that someone else, someone I thought was long gone, was watching it all unfold, waiting for the right moment to return. But that's all to come. Next, I had to make the first move. Quiet, precise, irreversible. Like pressing the first domino. I started with the family's newest vanity project, the Devo Center for Ethical Leadership. Because nothing screams guilt like trying to buy your own absolution. When the first domino falls. After Miranda confirmed the documents were real, I couldn't sit still. My skin itched like the truth was trying to break out of me. I kept replaying the slap, the laughter, and Lily's eyes red, unblinking. It wasn't just about that moment. It was everything that came before it. Every time they shut me down with a smile, every Thanksgiving where I sat at the end of the table, barely a guest in my own bloodline. That's when I knew I couldn't just confront them. That would give them control. I had to outmaneuver them. The first step was small. I went to the local library, not some flashy legal firm. Just me, Miranda, and a dusty conference room with flickering lights. We printed everything: ledger's board filings, scanned copies of Cecile's second will. We used 3 USBs, 2 clouds, a burner drive, and hid a copy inside a Dropbox folder titled 2017 Taxes, LOL. Paranoia, maybe. But when you're up against people who hosted charity galas while laundering grants meant for addiction recovery programs, you can't be too careful. What Miranda and I noticed first was that Cecile's updated will, which named me as her primary heir, not the Devo Family Foundation, was never notarized. But she had recorded a video of herself signing it. And guess what? That was dated after the one they filed. There's a name for that in court. It's not bulletproof, but it's something. What really mattered, though, was the money. The accounts Cecile supposedly left to the foundation had been drained 6 months before she died. Quietly through offshore accounts, some under my name, others under shell corporations tied to my father's old consulting firm. That was the bigger crime: financial misrepresentation, wire fraud, identity theft. And it was time to poke the bear. I filed a whistleblower report anonymously to the IRS and the Office of the Attorney General. I included flagged excerpts from the ledger and a list of suspicious real estate flips in Newark, Trenton, and Detroit. I signed it using Cecile's old nickname for me, Soul. Not exactly subtle, but I wanted them to feel it. Like heat rising under a closed door. Next, I requested a certified copy of Cecile's death certificate, her will, and probate court filings. I told the clerk I was working on a documentary. That part wasn't entirely a lie. I'd started recording voice memos to track my thoughts, raw, unfiltered memories, in case something happened to me. My voice was shaky in the first ones, full of nervous breath, and rage bubbling just beneath. I didn't expect a response so soon, but 3 days after the report, I got a voicemail from someone named Rowena Hale. "Ro," she said, "used to work with Cecile. Now at the AG's white-collar crimes unit. We need to talk." Ro was sharp as glass. She met me at a coffee shop in Montclair, ordered black tea, and didn't touch it. "What you sent us is enough to open an inquiry," she said, "but not enough to name names in court." "Yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you prepared to testify because you're going to be painted as a bitter niece with an axe to grind?" I told her the truth. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because I needed to look my daughter in the eyes and know I didn't let monsters raise their glasses while stepping over the bones of better people. I wasn't just exposing a family, I was breaking a cycle. Ro gave me her card. "When you're ready to burn the whole tree down," she said, "call me. But just know, roots go deep." I didn't go home after that meeting. I drove to the cemetery instead. Cecile was buried under a white marble headstone that read, "She was light." God, how ironic. She died quietly alone and misrepresented. But even in death, she left a matchbook for me to light. I left a tiny ceramic swan at the foot of her grave, one wing chipped. It was the same kind of pin she used to wear when she visited me at art camp the year my parents refused to come to my final show because Derek had a lacrosse game. That swan was my symbol now. Broken, yes, but still floating. Back home, things started shifting. Miss texted me out of nowhere. "Heard you're stirring things. Don't be dramatic." Derek called twice. I didn't answer. My mother sent me a peach cobbler. Not a note. Just a cobbler. It sat in the fridge until it turned gray. Then 2 things happened almost at once. First, my apartment was broken into. I came home to find drawers open, but nothing stolen. Not my laptop, not my TV, just my filing cabinet pried open. Sloppy, desperate. I knew exactly who it was. I checked the decoy folder labeled Pet Adoption Contracts I'd planted in case something like this happened. It was gone. Inside that folder, blank papers and a single printed quote, "May the lies you told become the truth you choke on." Second, Miranda called me at midnight. She was breathing fast. "They froze your accounts," she said. "All of them. Every bank you've ever used. Your name's been flagged under some kind of internal fraud review. You're on a watch list." And just like that, I was at war. I had $76 to my name, a 7-year-old asleep down the hall, and a growing case file stored on 6 hidden drives. I wasn't scared. I was furious. Because they were moving fast, sloppy, scared. That meant I'd hit something real. I called Ro. They made a move. That means I make mine. She sent 2 subpoenas the next day. One for bank records tied to the Devo Foundation. Another for internal correspondence between the trustees. Things were heating up. But here's the thing I didn't see coming. Natalie turned. She was Derek's wife. We'd bonded once over escape room parties and shared hatred of country clubs. She used to joke that marrying into the DeVos was like getting swallowed by a snake in a Gucci belt. When I showed her some of the documents, she promised to help, said she had emails between Martha and the foundation's accountant. But then, nothing. A week went by. Then I got served. Natalie had filed a complaint against me, claiming I threatened her with fabricated evidence and attempted to blackmail her into testifying. My own cousin-in-law had thrown herself on the grenade to protect the Golden Circle, but not before doing something stupid. In her complaint, she referenced documents only I and Miranda had seen. That meant someone had leaked, or had access. Miranda swore it wasn't her. I'd rather chew glass, so I checked my backups. The Dropbox folder was untouched, but the burner laptop, the one I'd used to open the USB, remote access, IP address, Dritus, Westfield at 10:44 p.m. on New Year's Eve. Guess who was in my building that night, Miss? She'd come to drop off a gift for Lily. Stayed 5 minutes. I assumed it was guilt. Turns out it was recon. And that broke me. I'd been careful. I'd played chess, but they weren't playing chess. They were swinging hammers. That night, I opened a new voice memo. If this goes bad, I said, don't believe their version of me. I wasn't angry. I was awake. I saw a machine pretending to be a family. and I decided to unplug it. I filed a restraining order the next day. Not for protection, for leverage. If anyone from the Devo family contacted me or approached Lily, they'd be in violation. That gave me space. And then I did something radical. I emailed the press. Not the big networks, not CNN, just a local investigative blog run by a former attorney named Yvette Cruz. She'd once exposed a real estate scam involving another prominent New Jersey family. I gave her everything: redacted names, Cecile's video, the ledger excerpts, enough to sniff around. She replied within 4 hours. "Holy hell," she wrote. "This rabbit hole got claws." She asked for one quote. Just one sentence on why I was doing this. I sent her because silence is the Devo family's true inheritance, and I'm not passing it down. The piece dropped 2 days later, and that's when all hell broke loose. But that's for part 3. Because before the lawsuits and the subpoenas and the televised hearings, there was one final act in this chapter. My daughter came home from school with a bruised apple in her lunchbox. And a note: "Tell your mom to stop lying. Or next time it won't be the apple." Handwritten, no name, just a drawing. Of a swan, one wing torn clean off. When the family strikes back, I stared at the drawing in Lily's lunchbox like it was a grenade. The torn swan one wing violently ripped off the same symbol Cecile once wore as quiet rebellion was now being used as a threat. That told me 2 things. One, someone on the inside knew exactly what Cecile meant to me. 2, they were no longer just playing defense. This was offensive warfare, and they were willing to go after a child. Lily didn't even notice the note. She just said, "I think the apple fell out of my backpack." She was used to bruises. She wasn't used to being targeted, but I was. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window again, same spot where I'd first opened Cecile's envelope, except this time I wasn't shaking. I was calculating. If they wanted to use the swan against me, fine. Let them. I'd already lived through their silence, their betrayal, their petty, polished cruelty. What I hadn't done until now was push back with everything I had. I sent a photo of the note to Roe from the AG's office. Within hours, a detective named Jacobs was assigned to the case. He interviewed Lily gently, like a human being, which felt strange after months of watching people treat her like collateral. But I could tell he didn't fully believe it came from someone inside the family. Could be a neighbor or a school bully. These things happen. No, I told him. In our world, nothing just happens. Meanwhile, Yvette Cruz's blog post had gone semi-viral. Not front-page news, but it caught attention in the right corner's activist forums, financial watchdogs, even a Reddit thread full of nonprofit auditors. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Some messages were kind survivors of family abuse thanking me for speaking up. Others were from Devo associates, icy legal threats dressed as concern. Then came the email from someone called Atlas Owl with no signature. Just a subject line, "I know what they did to Cecile." I hesitated for 3 hours before responding. I used a burner account set up through a VPN. "If you know something, say it. I don't play games." They replied with a name I hadn't heard in over a decade, Marka Wells. Marka had been Cecile's personal assistant for almost 10 years. She'd vanished after Cecile's funeral. No explanation, no forwarding address. The family said she moved back to Missouri to care for her ailing mother. I remembered my mother using that exact phrase like she was reading off a script. Turns out Marka never left New Jersey. She'd been hiding figuratively and literally. I met her at a diner off Route 22, 2 towns over, where no one used real names, and the coffee was bottomless. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, but her eyes still had that fierce alertness, like she could smell bullshit from across the room. "You think you're the first one they tried to erase?" she said, stirring her tea. Cecile warned them, told them if they kept funneling money through foundations named after dead veterans and cancer kids, it would eventually come out. That's when she got sick. Sick. Marka nodded. She started collapsing, dizzy spells, seizures. The doctors blamed stress, then said it was a rare neurological disorder. But Cecile kept saying something was off. She started having her food delivered separately, installed cameras in her guest house. Then, 1 week before she was set to meet with a journalist, dead. Stroke, no autopsy. I felt like someone had poured ice down my spine. "Are you saying they poisoned her?" "I'm saying she knew too much and died too conveniently." Marka reached into her bag and slid over a worn notebook. These are Cecile's personal notes. She told me to give them to you if you ever started asking the right questions. The notebook was thin, soft covered with a broken spine. Inside were scattered entries, names, dates, wire transfers, and one passage that stopped my heart cold. If Alan finds out I rewrote the will, he'll discredit me. If Martha finds out, she'll let him. But if they find out I left the trust to Solon, they'll make her disappear, legally or otherwise. This wasn't just paranoia. This was a woman on the edge of being silenced. Marka also had a copy of a thumb drive. I didn't have the missing security footage from Cecile's guest house. The night before she died, the file showed her pacing, speaking into a recorder. Then, a cut. And suddenly, she's on the ground. Her tea mug shattered. No one enters or leaves the frame. It was too clean. Almost like someone knew how to scrub footage, or pay someone to do it. I thanked Marka, hugged her longer than I should have, and left with the notebook tucked under my coat like it was a heart I couldn't let anyone see. That was the last time I saw her alive. 2 days later, Marka was found in her car carbon monoxide leak, ruled a suicide. But Marka didn't drive. Ever. She had epilepsy. She hadn't renewed her license in 6 years. That was in her file. I sent it all to Roe. And that's when the AG's office went from interested to active investigation. They issued quiet subpoenas, interviewed staff from the Devo Foundation, quietly started pulling security logs and financial audits from the last 10 years. And I got a message, lay low. Don't engage, we're building the case. But how could I lay low? I had a kid being watched, a dead aunt, a dead assistant, a family that wouldn't blink twice at framing me for wire fraud or throwing me under a bus just to keep the donations coming in. So I did the only thing I could think of. I filmed a video, just me on camera, no makeup, no script, just my voice. Hi, my name is Solon Devo. If you're watching this, it means the truth finally caught up. And if something happens to me, here's what you need to know. I laid it all out. Cecile's will, the foundation scams, the attempt to erase me, the threats, the bruised apple, the broken swan. I uploaded it to a private link scheduled to auto-publish if I didn't manually reset the timer every 72 hours. My failsafe. But then, twist number 652, someone beat me to it. A video leaked online 3 days before the grand jury hearing. It wasn't mine. It was from a hidden camera inside the Devo Foundation's conference room. A board meeting. Derek Miss and my father discussing damage control. Derek, we push back on the blog story. Frame her as unstable. Leak the therapy records. My father. She won't fight once Lily's custody is questioned. Threaten child endangerment. Miss she has no money left. Just freeze her out and wait her out. The worst part, my mother was there, silent. Not once did she say, that's too far. Not once did she ask, what about Lily? She just sipped her tea, nodded occasionally. I watched the video 3 times, and then I finally cried. Not for them. For the version of myself that kept hoping they'd see me as a daughter, not a liability. Then I dried my tears, reset the countdown on my own video, and packed a go bag. Just in case. I didn't know where this was heading next. All I knew was this someone inside the Devo Fortress was leaking footage. Someone was helping me. But why? And who? That answer would change everything. Because sometimes your greatest ally is the one who knows exactly how the house was built. The architect of the fall. It took me a full hour to admit it out loud. Someone from inside the Devo family was helping me. Not just helping coordinating. That conference room video didn't just happen to leak. It was extracted. It was curated, and it was timed, which meant someone had a plan of their own. The question was, were they trying to take the family down or just save themselves from going down with it? I made a list. The obvious traitors were out Derek Mize, my father, my mother. Natalie burned that bridge. Mrs. daughter Amber was too young and Lily was too innocent. That left Logan. Logan was my cousin, Alan's nephew. The family's startup genius, though the only thing he ever launched was a crypto platform that folded after 6 months and somehow still got him on a Forbes list. He always seemed like a side player, just enough charm to stay invited, just enough distance to never be blamed. But here's the thing about people like Logan, when the money runs dry, they suddenly remember they have a conscience. I reached out through a fake LinkedIn profile. No message, just viewed his profile 3 times in 24 hours. It's the digital equivalent of breathing down someone's neck. He messaged back by that evening. We should talk. Discreetly, I'll send location. He picked a sketchy cigar bar in Jersey City, one of those places where no one asks your name, and every bartender looks like they've done time. I walked in wearing black jeans, a hoodie, and no trace of the Devo name. Logan spotted me instantly. He looked tired, unshaved, nervous, like he'd finally realized the yacht wasn't coming back for him. He didn't waste time. I leaked the footage, he said, not even waiting for me to sit. I had the backup files. I thought it'd make a dent. Didn't know they'd go after your kid. I stared at him. You thought exposing a coordinated smear campaign against a single mom wouldn't get personal. He winced. Okay, fair. Look, I've been screwed by them too. Derek used my company as a shell to move some of the foundation's money offshore. When I tanked, they let me take the fall. Said I mismanaged it. You think I got a bailout like Derek? Nah. I got silence. They ghosted me, like I was some intern who spilled wine on a donor. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I believed him. So what do you want? I asked. Logan looked away. I want immunity. When this thing crashes, I don't want to go down with it. And you think I can get you that? I think you've got the AG's office, the media, and about 3 different watchdog groups watching your every move. I think you're the safest bet. I didn't trust him, but I needed him. Because what Logan had wasn't just a confession, it was a map. And it led somewhere no one had looked yet, the family vault. Now let me clarify, this isn't some Hollywood-style underground bank vault with lasers. It's a literal room in my parents' house. The vault was Alan's archive of financial records, old contracts, confidential board minutes, and allegedly recordings of meetings that were too sensitive for email. It was locked, of course. Digital keypad, reinforced door fingerprint scan. The whole thing screamed, "Come rob me." Logan still had access. Apparently, years ago, my father had Logan listed as a proxy for foundation succession planning, basically a PR stunt to make it look like the younger generation was involved. Logan used that to get admin credentials, then never got removed when he imploded. So we planned a heist. Okay, not a real heist, but it felt like one. We'd wait until my parents were in Connecticut for some gala. Logan would use his credentials to enter under the pretext of retrieving tax documents, and I'd be parked 3 blocks away with my laptop and a VPN, ready to receive files as he uploaded them. It went wrong within 5 minutes. Logan's credentials had been revoked. He didn't get past the entry scan. He called me in a panic, whispering, "They locked it down." I think they know. I told him to abort, but he didn't. He tried again the next night, and this time he got in. I don't know how, maybe he bribed a contractor. Maybe he had a copy of an old thumbprint. But at 2:36 a.m., I got a ping, then another, then 28 files rapid fire from a private server labeled Devo Legacy Archive. He dumped them into our shared encrypted drive. By 3 a.m., he texted, "Done." I'm out. He wasn't. Logan was arrested 2 days later for breaking and entering. The charges were dropped within hours, but the message was clear: play with fire, get burned. But what he got us, it was worth it. Inside those files were decades of internal audits, names, payouts, donations that magically turned into consulting fees. But the real bombshell, a recording. Dated October 4th, 2018. Alan Devo, if Cecile files that new will have to act. Quietly. A cardiac incident, maybe. It can't trace back. Martha Devo. She's erratic. No one would question it. Especially not Solon. She's always been the emotional one. I listened to it 3 times, then I sent it to Ro. She called me 10 minutes later. "We have them," she said. "But now we need to move fast. They'll bury this if we don't get ahead." What followed was a blur. A subpoena for Cecile's medical records. An exhumation request. A sealed hearing. All while I still had to drop Lily off at school, pack lunches, and pretend I wasn't dismantling a dynasty with a cracked phone and a half-dead laptop. But here's where it got complicated. My mother. She called me. Not Derek, not Miss, not even a lawyer. Her. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Her voice was calm, controlled, like nothing had happened. "Solon, let's have tea." Tea. The same thing she drank while they plotted to destroy me. I showed up at her garden room 2 days later. She was already pouring chamomile. The same kind Cecile had in her cup when she died. She didn't apologize. She didn't confess. She said, "You always believed truth mattered more than peace. That's your weakness." I laughed. "And you always believed peace meant silence. That's yours." She looked at me, really looked. "You think you're winning, but there's no such thing as victory in a family war. Only survivors." I stood to leave. "Did you love her?" I asked. She didn't answer. I walked out, left the tea untouched. That night, the court approved Cecile's exhumation, and 1 week later, toxicology confirmed it traces of digitalis, a plant-based poison. Not enough to kill instantly. Enough to weaken the heart over time. Cause a stroke. Leave no trace if no one's looking. They hadn't just stolen her fortune. They'd stolen her life. The AG's office filed charges under seal. I wasn't told the details, but I knew what was coming, and I knew what I had to do. I wrote a letter to Lily, just in case. "Sweetheart, the world will tell you that silence keeps things whole, that pretending everything is okay keeps the peace, but it doesn't. It just hands the microphone to the ones who hurt people. Speak. Always speak. Even if your voice shakes. Even if you stand alone. You come from women who survived silence, but you will be the one who breaks it." I folded it, put it in the bottom drawer, right next to Cecile's swan pin, the one with the broken wing, because now it wasn't broken, it was reshaped, and I wasn't done yet. Trial testimony and the ghosts in the room. When you've spent your whole life being ignored or silenced by the very people who are supposed to love you, standing in a courtroom is like standing at the edge of a cliff. You don't really know if you're ready to jump, but you know you can't go back. The air feels thin, the ground feels far away, and every moment of silence feels like the sky pressing down on you, waiting for you to make a decision. I had been preparing for this moment for months, but nothing really prepared me for walking into that courtroom. The walls were too high, the seats too tight, the judge too detached. It was all so sterile, and yet every inch of it felt like the story of my life, perfectly polished, perfectly controlled, and yet fundamentally empty. The courtroom was packed, which was a surprise. I didn't expect the media circus to be this big. Reporters and photographers stood at the back, some taking notes, others just staring at me like I was a bug under a microscope. And there, sitting at the front, were my family. My father, Alan Devo, sat next to my mother, Martha. Derek was leaning back in his chair, his face a mixture of smugness and anxiety. Miss looked almost bored, flipping through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Logan sat beside them, his expression unreadable, as if he was trying to hold everything inside, but it was clear he was barely keeping it together. I felt like an outsider in my own life, and it hit me harder than I'd expected. They were all here pretending this was just another corporate dispute, another family matter to be handled behind closed doors. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that the walls they'd built to protect their lies were about to come crashing down. But I was ready. I had to be. When my name was called, I stood up slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the bench. I wasn't nervous. At least I didn't feel nervous. I felt angry. And it was the kind of anger that comes when you've been wronged so many times that you've finally stopped hoping things will get better. I walked to the witness stand with my head held high, the words of Cecile's last letter echoing in my mind. "You come from women who survived silence, but you will be the one who breaks it." The first few questions were standard. Who are you? What's your relationship to the Devo family? But I could tell from the way the defense attorney, Carlton Merritt, looked at me that he wasn't going to make this easy. He was a seasoned lawyer, used to twisting the truth and making his clients look like saints. He wasn't going to let me win without a fight. "Ms. Devo," he said smoothly, "you've been quite vocal about your family's financial activities, yet none of the accusations you've made are backed by any formal legal documents. You don't have any proof, do you?" I looked him dead in the eye. I don't need proof when the truth speaks for itself. I wasn't playing by his rules. I wasn't going to let him box me into his narrative of the disgruntled daughter with an axe to grind. I knew I had to do more than just speak the truth. I had to make them feel it. Every lie they'd built, every little corner they'd tried to shove me into, I was going to drag it all into the light. "Let's talk about the foundation's funds." I continued, leaning forward slightly. "I have copies of the financial reports from the past decade, along with board meeting minutes, all of which show a pattern of misappropriation. You see, the Devo Foundation was a vehicle for more than just charity. It was a laundering operation for the Devo family's personal wealth. Carlton opened his mouth, but I cut him off before he could interrupt. No, let me finish. I also have a recording from October 4th, 2018, in which Alan Devo, the CEO of the foundation, is heard discussing the need to quietly handle Cecile's revised will. Not only that, but the family also orchestrated a plan to handle Cecile's health, her medical treatment, and ultimately her death. Digitalis, a plant-based poison, was used to induce a stroke. I paused, letting the words sink in. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The reporters at the back shuffled their papers. I saw the color drain from my father's face. My mother sat completely still, her face unreadable. Derek looked confused, like he hadn't expected this turn of events. But the worst was Logan. He didn't look at me at all. He was staring at his shoes, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might shatter his teeth. Carlton recovered quickly, but I could see the cracks in his smooth demeanor. Ms. Devo, this is absurd. There's no evidence that your father was involved in any criminal activity. This is pure speculation and— It's not speculation, I interrupted. It's fact. I have the files, the financial statements, the video of the meeting where your client Alan Devo and my mother discuss how to discredit Cecile's will. And I have the poison that killed her. Digitalis. Carlton faltered for just a second. His eyes darted to my father, then to the judge, as if he were waiting for the judge to intervene. But Judge Hamilton didn't. She just sat there taking notes, waiting for him to respond. We'll see how the jury reacts to this, Carlton muttered under his breath, but I didn't care. I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at my father. I saw the shame in his eyes for the first time in my life. He looked old, fragile. His carefully constructed image of the confident patriarch was cracking. He wasn't the same man who had once walked into rooms and commanded respect. He was just a man like any other, and the truth was a wrecking ball. Your Honor, Carlton said, clearing his throat, I'd like to request a recess. I need to confer with my client. Judge Hamilton nodded. Granted. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. The courtroom emptied out, and I was escorted back to the holding area. I couldn't help but notice the stares from the people in the hallway, the whispers, the sideways glances. I could feel the weight of everyone's judgment. But I didn't care. I had made my move. I had said what needed to be said. And now it was time to let them feel the consequences of their actions. When I walked into the holding room, I was surprised to see someone waiting for me. It wasn't Roe or my lawyer, or even someone from the press. It was Miss. She stood there in a navy blazer, her arms folded, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and defiance. You were always the smart one, Solon, she said quietly. Always thinking ahead, always seeing things no one else could. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there watching her, waiting for her to say something more. She hesitated, then spoke again, her voice shaking slightly. I know what they did. I know about Cecile. I know about the poison, and I know they used you. I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't the Miss I knew. This wasn't the sister who had cut me out of the family years ago. What do you want? Her eyes softened. I don't want to be like them. I never wanted to be like them. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I also wasn't sure if I cared anymore. I'd gotten to this point on my own, with no help from her or anyone else, and I wasn't going to let her waltz in now and try to rewrite history. Stay out of it, Miss, I said coldly. This isn't your fight. She opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it, a defeated look crossing her face. She turned and walked out without another word. I stood there staring at the door she'd just left through, wondering if it was too late for her to change. Wondering if I had made a mistake by not trusting her. But then I remembered the swan, and I knew I was right to keep moving forward. The final showdown. It's strange how the hardest moments are often the ones that you can't see coming. You spend months, sometimes years, building up this narrative in your head, telling yourself how you'll handle it when the world finally starts to unravel. You imagine your big moments, the courtroom scene, the confrontation, the victory. But then life has a funny way of sneaking in something unexpected, something you didn't plan for. And that something is usually the thing that knocks you down hardest. It came 2 days after Miss left the holding room. I was in the middle of reviewing the next batch of documents for my attorney when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Roe Solon. We need you at the courthouse now. They're about to pull a move that will change everything. Bring everything you've got. I knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't just a court hearing anymore. This had escalated. My father's legal team was about to launch their final assault, and the only thing standing between my family and full exposure was me and whatever secrets I still had to reveal. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed the files, the ones that had started it all, the recording of my father's voice, the medical reports, Cecile's will. I stuffed them into my bag like they were nothing more than papers, but I knew better. Each piece was a brick in the wall I had to tear down. When I arrived at the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. There was a buzz in the air, a heaviness that I hadn't felt before. My parents' lawyers had gone on the offensive, and they weren't playing fair anymore. They had subpoenaed everything, my past, my future. The Devo legacy was on the line, and for the first time, I felt a sense of urgency that I hadn't fully grasped until now. I walked into the courtroom and saw my father sitting at the table, his face taut with anxiety. He was trying to hold it together, but the cracks were starting to show. His eyes met mine for the first time in days, and I saw something in them that I'd never seen before: fear. It wasn't just the fear of losing the case, though, that was clearly part of it. It was the fear of being exposed for who he truly was. A man who had built an empire on manipulation, deceit, and betrayal. A man who had no idea that the one person he'd always underestimated, his own daughter, was the one who would bring it all down. But I wasn't thinking about him right then. I was thinking about Lily, my daughter. The one person I couldn't fail, the one person who didn't deserve to inherit this nightmare. When the court session began, I sat in the witness box, my heart racing. I could feel the eyes of the entire room on me. The prosecution, the defense, the reporters. I didn't care about any of them. What mattered now was telling the truth. The truth that would make them understand I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the future. Carlton Merritt, my father's lawyer, stood up with that practiced, smug grin. He'd always been good at talking in circles, twisting the truth into whatever shape suited his clients. "Ms. Devo," he began, "you've been making some very serious accusations about your family, but you've yet to provide any concrete evidence. No police reports, no forensic findings, just hearsay. Why should anyone believe you?" I held his gaze, my hands steady on the stand. "Because unlike you, I'm not afraid to tell the truth." That silence, that moment, it felt like the entire room leaned in, waiting for the next words, and I gave them what they needed to hear. I've seen my family destroy people. I've seen them steal from the very communities they claim to serve. And I've seen them lie to the public while lining their pockets. But this time the truth will come out. I pulled out the recording from October 4th, 2018, the one where my father and mother discussed Cecile's death. I knew what it would do. I knew how it would land. I just wasn't sure if I was ready for the fallout. I played it. I didn't watch my father's face. I didn't need to. I heard his voice on the recording, heard him plotting, heard the cold, methodical way he talked about his sister's death like it was just another business transaction. My mother's voice came through too, suggesting they make it look like a stroke. That part, her voice, was what gutted me the most. When the recording ended, there was a quiet shift in the room. The jury, the judge, even the defense attorneys were all staring at the screen. It wasn't the evidence that had hit them hardest. It was the fact that the very family they had trusted was capable of such manipulation, such cruelty. Carlton Merritt was quick to recover, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Your Honor," he said, his voice tight, "this is an invasion of privacy, a distorted recording. It cannot be used as evidence." But Judge Hamilton was already looking at the transcript. She turned to the jury, her voice stern. "This court has heard enough. We will reconvene in 1 hour for deliberation." The defense was scrambling. I could see it in their faces. They weren't prepared for this kind of exposure. They didn't expect me to be the one to finally take them down. The thought that this could be the turning point made my stomach twist with both fear and exhilaration, because I knew deep down that I had just set something in motion that couldn't be undone. But I wasn't celebrating, not yet. I went back to the holding room, my hands still shaking, and I pulled out the letter I had written to Lily. I hadn't planned to give it to her, not yet, but something about the weight of the moment, the feeling of standing on the edge of everything, made me realize that if I didn't do it now, I might never have the chance. I left the letter on her bed where she could find it later, just in case. It was then that I heard footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the usual buzz of activity, but then I heard a soft knock at the door. I turned expecting one of my lawyers. It was Miss. She stood there, arms folded, her face drawn. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look like the polished, perfect Devo sibling. She looked broken. "I know what I've done," she said quietly. "I know I can't fix it. But I want you to know I'm on your side. I always was." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at her for everything she had taken from me, for all the years she spent choosing them over me. But another part of me, the part that had always hoped for some kind of reconciliation, just nodded. "Then show me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Show me that you're not just another Devo. Prove that you have a spine." She didn't say anything at first. She just stood there looking at me. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of this family's crimes. Miss had spent her life buried under the same lies, but she wasn't too far gone. She could still change. "Let's finish this together," I said, my voice a little steadier now. And just like that, something shifted between us. Something that didn't erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, could help us face the future. Story 2. Daniel is my name. My age is 31. I've also been the quiet one in my family for the most of my life. No concerns the person who always responds and assists on moving day. As long as they remember to invite me the next time everyone in the group chat expects that I won't mind being excluded. I don't make sense. I don't argue. My voice was never the loudest in my family, as I discovered early on. However, that does not imply that I am not aware of things. I take note of everything. Chris, my younger brother, has always been the best kid. He is younger by 2 years. After switching degrees, barely finished college. He now works at a glitzy real estate company where he mostly use his charisma by posing for shirtless closing day pictures with customers. I chose a more subdued route in finance. Long hours. Don't take selfies. When I was 28, I purchased my first home, assisted my parents in paying off their mortgage following my dad's back injury, and even provided a loan to Chris. When he initially got to the city, he wanted to pay the rent. However, nobody recalls that. They do recall that Chris is entertaining and positive, and that he makes people laugh. I'm told I take things too seriously in the meanwhile. Our birthdays occurred within a few weeks of each other this year. Chris was the first. I showed up as usual, but I didn't have high expectations. A rooftop bar in the heart of the city was hired out complete with gold and silver balloons that said, "Happy 29th." A photographer's provided hors d'oeuvres, and even a specially designed cocktail menu with beverages that were named after his most memorable events. Like a hero of the battlefield, they toasted him. My mother made a presentation. My father gave him a Rolex in a velvet box. "Every man needs a good watch," he said with a proud smile. Everyone gave a clap. "I guess I'm finally the favorite for real now," Chris replied with a smirk. I laughed, really, because I knew the environment would change if I didn't. It always does. Tuesday happened to be my birthday. I expected maybe supper or cake, but I didn't expect a rooftop or a Rolex. That morning, my mother texted me, "Cheers to your birthday. Dinner with the family at 6 o'clock. He's questioning your dad." I gave her my gratitude. They were eating when I got there. My sister stated that we assumed you would simply turn there, which is why my name wasn't on the group chat earlier that day. I took a seat. No talking, no music, no decorations. They produced one cupcake that was left over. Vanilla. The sort I'm not even fond of, with a shattered candle wedged in the middle. I was given a card by my niece that had crayon drawings of a donkey on it. "Congratulations on another year of wasted potential," it added. Everyone chuckled. I didn't. Uncertain if it was a terrible family joke or a hoax, I simply sat there looking at it. My dad didn't tell me. Seeing the horror on my face, grinned and said, "Relax, it's just a joke. Unless you're still sensitive." I heard my sister whispered, "Yikes," like I was the problem for not playing along. The moment hung heavy in the air. I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the cupcake, the card, and the table. No one noticed. I stood up, said I had to get back to work, and walked out. No one stopped me. I didn't weep. I didn't shout, but I drove straight home. Heart-thudding ears ringing with every line I didn't speak. I glanced at the snapshot again. The cheap paper plate, the dirty tablecloth, the half-drank Coke cans in that card placed dead center like a middle finger. That night, I opened Instagram and posted the photo with a message that read, "Some birthdays come with champagne and Rolexes. Some arrive with leftovers and reminders you'll never be enough. Cheers to knowing the difference." Within an hour, my phone started vibrating. Old college pals remarked stuff like, "What happened?" "And are you okay?" My cousin, who lives across the nation and seldom speaks to the rest of the family, DM'd me. "This can't be genuine. Please tell me this isn't your birthday." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. By daybreak, the post had over 300 likes. I didn't even tag anyone. But the message was plain. That's when the call started. First my mom, then Chris, then my sister. I didn't answer, but it was my Aunt Maria who eventually snapped. She left a voicemail that started with, "What did you post?" and culminated into her shouting about how private family things don't belong online, how I was making everyone appear awful, and how people at church are asking questions. I listened to the message twice. Then I grinned because for once they were the ones uncomfortable. For once they had to answer for something, and I wasn't even close to done. I didn't react to anyone for 2 days. I stopped the group chat, ignored the missed calls, let the messages build up. They varied from phony concern, "Are you okay?" to covert threats. "Will a cupcake really cause you to sour relations?" Chris sent a text. "It was only a joke, dude. Avoid making it strange." For a long time, I gazed at that one. It felt strange that the same person who had earlier failed to attend my college graduation breakfast was now giving me a lecture. I didn't respond. I changed a couple things instead. I started by locking my PayPal and Venmo accounts. How frequently I got would astound you. "Can you see me buddy request from Chris and the rest of the family?" They were utilizing Netflix, Spotify, and the phone plan my sister had been using temporarily since 2019 when I erased all of their joint accounts. I detached my Amazon Prime account from my parents' login, updated all of my passwords, and removed my card from the Uber family profile. It wasn't trivial, it was past due. I cleansed my feet second. I made my Instagram account public. I shared a carousel of old pictures of me during Chris's birthday, including one from the summer of me helping Dad out in the garage, and another of me clapping in the background as he unwrapped presents. My sister needed help, so every morning, I transported her children to camp. I wrote just a few memories with people who always said they don't know where me as the caption. I had the notion. I get different treatment from them. No tags, no names. However, the comments came flooding in. Coworkers, friends, and even a few of my mom's former book club pals. According to some, this explains a lot. Or pleased with you for raising your voice. My sister eventually broke that afternoon. Unannounced, she knocked on my door as if it were an emergency. She didn't even say hello when I answered the door. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," he remarked as he entered. I folded my arms and leaned on the counter to listen to her. She continued by saying that her parents had good intentions and that organizing Chris's celebration was just simpler. How my lack of ease always makes things more difficult. Then she made a statement that made me stop. "You constantly assume that others can read your thoughts. If a larger party was what you want, you ought to have inquired." She was shocked by the biting, bitter sound of my laughter. "I must request that I not be made fun of on my birthday." She blinked. "It was only a joke. You mentioned that repeatedly." I don't recall my response being humorous. She grumbled and rolled her eyes. "People don't know how to handle you because of this." That was the end of it. I gave up trying at that point. I didn't request her to go. I simply opened the door and waited for her to go past me in a rage. She didn't bid farewell. My mother texted me that weekend. It began with, "You know your father didn't mean it that way," and finished with this lengthy paragraph. "Stop being so theatrical now." As though that might lessen the impact, she included a smiling face. The problem with being the quiet one, though, is this. When we do talk, people are unsure about how to deal with it. They are accustomed to us denying the pain and reducing ourselves to maintain harmony. They never anticipate us resisting. They never anticipate that we will record everything. So I did something I never would have imagined doing. I began to write a blog. Unidentified. Initially, tales, recollections, events that influenced my perception of my family, and how I was never truly seen by them. It wasn't retaliation, it served as therapy. People then began to read. It went somewhat viral to share a post about being the family's emotional garbage dump. I was asked by a local mental health advocate if I would ever think about making the post into a podcast or series. Although I didn't say no, I also didn't say yes. My dad called a week later. I didn't respond. His voicemail was left. It wasn't long. "Daniel, enough is enough. This has gotten out of hand. The family is being embarrassed by you." Then a silence. "Your point has been made." We are anticipating an apology. For days, the voicemail kept playing in my mind. The family is being embarrassed by you, not causing them harm, not letting them down. It's embarrassing. That word adhered to the shoe sole like gum. I deleted the message after playing it back once. I had no intention of answering. Not now. Every bone in my body warned me that I had to be careful about what I did next. Passive silence is over. No more ignoring the situation. This time just to maintain some peace. I wanted people to know the truth. Not merely in ambiguous blog entries or Instagram captions, but explicitly presented with names, dates, and memories that never fully went away. I made an appointment with a local photographer for that Friday. I asked her to recreate the lighting from the rooftop lounge while wearing the same button-down shirt I had worn to Chris's birthday. Then I held that leftover cupcake in one hand and the joke birthday card in the other. The frosting slightly melted just like it had been. She snapped a dozen shots. On Monday, I posted the most striking one with a new caption. "This was my birthday gift from my family this year. After helping them pay off their mortgage, after bailing out my brother, after covering my niece's tuition deposit, when my sister was between jobs not asking for applause. Just tired of pretending this didn't happen." The photo spread fast. People I hadn't heard from in years messaged me. High school classmates, an old boss, even a distant cousin in New Jersey who had cut contact with our side of the family ages ago. One message read, "This is the most honest thing I've seen in a long time. Thank you." But the comments section, that was something else entirely. Hundreds of strangers chimed in, some sharing similar experiences, others expressing outrage. A few people, probably family friends under burner accounts, accused me of airing dirty laundry and being ungrateful. I didn't respond to them. I didn't have to. The community did it for me. But then came the remarks that tipped everything over. Someone having a certified checkmark. An editor from a prominent digital magazine commented, "If you're willing to relate your tale, our readers need to hear it. Check your DMs." I sat with the message for hours. Part of me hesitated. I could already hear the charges. Attention-seeking theatrical, attempting to destroy the family for clout. But another part of me, the one that had sat quietly through years of being disregarded, rejected, and treated like a second-tier sibling, leaned forward and clicked. Reply? That's how the interview transpired. They dubbed it the invisible child. What happens when families neglect to celebrate everyone? My birthday was no longer the only topic of conversation. Patterns, generational partiality, and the experience of being the one who consistently gives yet is never seen were all topics of discussion. Although I didn't mention names, I also didn't sugarcoat anything. I told anecdotes about how my mother framed my brother's graduation pictures, but neglected to order mine. Chris received a new laptop for Christmas, and I received socks. The year I planned the whole family trip, you were too busy getting towels to include me in the group shot. On a Tuesday, the article was published. Its share count had surpassed 200,000 by Wednesday morning. My email was overflowing. The actual fallout began at that point. Chris was the first to call. He didn't shout. He didn't use profanity. I had never heard the term flat used to describe his voice. "Do you truly despise us that much?" I took a while to reply. I could sense his rage building as he awaited an opportunity to attack. I said, "I don't hate you, but I'm done acting like everything is fine just because it makes things easier for you." He sneered. "Are you aware of how this appears regarding that piece I received messages from clients, customers? We all looked like monsters because of you, Daniel." "No, you did that yourself," I said. "I just raised the mirror." He ended the call. The following day, my mother arrived at my place. I refused to allow her in. Through the door, we exchanged words. She made an effort to act like the victim. "Are you aware of the damage you have caused to this family?" Her voice broke as she said, "People are conversing. Your father has extremely high blood pressure. Your sister has trouble sleeping. What about your brother?" "He feels ashamed." I said nothing. Then she said it. "It was always you who was unappreciative. No, we apologize. No, we ought to have performed better. Thank you, similar to all I've ever given them. Time and money. Love was only a deposit for quiet." When I did respond, I was calmer but tougher than she had ever heard me. "You sent me a card that claimed my life was a waste and a cupcake, and now that I've finally consented, you're upset." A lengthy pause ensued. Footsteps followed by quiet. My phone buzzed once more that evening. One of my relatives texted me a screenshot. It came from the chat room for the family group. Chris threatened to sue me if I ever mentioned him in public again. My dad said I brought dishonor to the family, and my aunt called me manipulative, so I was kicked out of the thread. However, my sister's message was what really stopped me cold. It has always been his desire to be the victim. Give it to him. Remember who assisted with changing his diapers, though? I looked at it for a while. I realized they weren't seeing me, not because it hurt anymore. They didn't. The world was now observing. I didn't reply to any of them for a week. I needed time to ponder and experience things completely rather than repressing it like I normally had. Being noticed felt weird. Genuinely seen by strangers who had read my story and been in touch not by my family. Educators, counselors, and reserved siblings from noisy households. A lady wrote, "I had no idea that anyone else had a birthday similar to mine. Reading yours made me cry." Another person added, "I called my younger brother to apologize after reading your post. It was always he who fell behind." Nevertheless, I knew what was coming, so even with all the encouraging comments, I felt a low hum of dread in my chest. The last pushback. One night my dad called. I responded in part because I was curious, but it was late later than he typically remained up. No greeting was exchanged, only a sigh. Then, "So are you now this person? For what purpose did I drag us through the mud and throw dirt on the family name by not responding to you? Some attention from strangers on the internet." I remained silent and let him to rant. "At work, your mother is unable to reveal her face. Your brother is considering relocating to avoid the rumors. What do you think you're proud of?" No? I finally admitted that I wasn't proud. Simply put, I no longer feel ashamed. He fell silent. Silence is that. Told me everything. He wasn't trying to figure it out. He was reprimanding. And I was no longer his dutiful son. He remarked icily, "You've made your bed. Nobody will assist you in lying in it." He hung up after that. My landlord sent me an email the next day. I had been the target of 2 noise complaints from an unnamed person. I had been living alone in a peaceful apartment for weeks. In response to my inquiry, the landlord stated that the complaint detailed angry outbursts and hostile-sounding Zoom calls. It was absurd and obviously made up, but it was obvious that someone was attempting to cause trouble. The worst of it then arrived. I had been working with one of my clients for more than 2 years when they sent me an email informing me that they were ending our agreement. Not a warning, just a vague. We chose to proceed in a new route. I wasn't gullible. I was aware of my family's power. My dad was still acquainted with financial folks. My brother was friends with people in the real estate industry. Whispers are quick to spread. It was not long before I made the connection. They were more than simply injured. They were striking back. Here's something they didn't anticipate, though. I was prepared. I had learned how to prepare from all those years of being disregarded, undervalued, and written off. I wasn't careless. I had money saved up. Now I had a network. My fan base was expanding. I had nothing left to lose, and that was most crucial. After the article informed the magazine editor that I was prepared to go further, I gave her a call. This time, we planned a complete interview video. I didn't hold back. For every dime they provided or got, I discussed the manipulation, the partiality, and the emotional debt they carried over my head. With the clarity that comes only from years of silent observation, I spoke gently. I then launched my own website. No longer a blog, a whole platform. The Silent Ones. I dubbed it a place for those who had grown up in households where birthdays were accompanied by reminders that they weren't good enough and where love had restrictions. I started from scratch while building it. Stories, forums, and even a portal for anonymous submissions. The website had more than 20,000 subscribers in only 3 months. I began receiving webinar podcast and speaking requests. A few of book agents contacted us. I took care to avoid becoming a caricature of trauma. I had no desire to make a show out of my suffering. However, I knew this area was important. I was aware that there were more of us than most people wanted to acknowledge. Then the phone rang. Grandma was unexpected. The lone member of the family was she. I had maintained communication with my father's mother. Like me, she was quiet, perceptive, and frequently disregarded. She made no inquiries regarding the website or the article. "Daniel," she said, "I've had something I wanted to share with you. When your father was your age, I listened. He used to call me a burden," she added, claimed that I had never made a contribution, said that I was only a mouth to feed. I remained silent. I assumed he would respect me if I remained silent for a while. She hesitated. He didn't. I was at a loss for words, so I remained silent. "But you didn't stay quiet," she said, "and for that I'm proud of you." I had never heard those remarks from anyone in my family before. It was a peaceful final break with the others. A group email with family updates was forwarded to me. It contained pictures from the trip, a remark on Chris's new home, and a brief reference to my parents' will revision. The communication had no mention of my name. There isn't even a line wishing you well. I had been obliterated. I should have been angry or wounded, but instead I felt liberated. When my birthday rolled around again, I didn't hold off on making plans till someone else did. I took today off, rented a peaceful mountain cottage. I brought a bottle of wine, a couple novels, and my laptop. I watched the sun set behind the trees while I sat on the porch. My phone was ringing with birthday greetings from actual friends, Quiet Ones members, and even former clients who had turned into allies. My life was not marked with a card, not a cheap cupcake. Nobody is asking me to calm down, just tranquility. And that's the problem with letting go of individuals who don't value you. At last, you have room to develop into the person they never thought you could be. I made my own table that year and stopped requesting a seat at theirs.